Hi there, and welcome back to the garden. I'm Eleanor. Before we begin, I'd love to know a little about your space, so tell me down in the comments. Roughly, how big is your actual front yard? Are we talking a modest strip along the front of the house, a tiny city lot, or maybe just a few feet between your door and the sidewalk? I ask because today's video is entirely for you, and I want you to know right from the start. A small space is not a limitation. It's actually a wonderful opportunity. Here's something I've learned after years of working with all kinds of front yards, large and small. A small garden that's been thoughtfully designed will almost always feel more spacious, more inviting, and more beautiful than a huge yard that's been planted without any real plan at all. Size was never really the deciding factor. Design was. And there are some genuinely clever, well-tested tricks that professional designers use again and again to make a small space feel dramatically larger, more open, and more generous than its actual square footage. So today, I'm sharing 10 of those tricks with you. 10 simple ideas that create the illusion of more space, more depth, and more grandeur in even the tiniest front yard. None of these require you to buy a bigger lot or knock down a fence. They're simply about seeing your small space differently and working with it cleverly rather than fighting against it. And do stay to the very end, because our last idea is one most people never even think to try, and it can transform how your whole yard feels after the sun goes down. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and if you love an easy, beautiful yard, no matter its size, tap that subscribe button. It truly helps this little channel grow. All right. Let's make your small space feel wonderfully big. Let's start with the single most valuable trick for any small yard, because it unlocks an entire dimension you're probably not using at all. Go vertical. Here's the thing about a small front yard. You're almost always short on floor space, on square footage at ground level. But look up, and there's often an enormous amount of unused vertical space along a wall, a fence, or an empty corner that most people never think to plant. When you train climbing plants up a trellis, mount planters directly onto a wall or fence, or hang baskets at different heights, you're adding real, substantial greenery and color to your yard without taking up a single extra inch of precious ground space. It's genuinely one of the highest value moves you can make in a tight space, and there's a wonderful bonus beyond the space saving itself. Vertical greenery draws the eye upward, which makes the whole yard feel taller and more generous, the same way a tall mirror or a striped wallpaper can make a small room feel bigger. A wall covered in climbing roses or a trellis dripping with clematis doesn't just look beautiful, it genuinely changes how spacious the whole yard feels. For your design, choose a flowering vine like clematis, climbing roses, or trumpet honeysuckle for a trellis or fence. Mount simple wall planters at varying heights for herbs or trailing flowers, and add a hanging basket or two near the entry for a layer of color right at eye level. My tip: make sure whatever you're training up a wall or trellis has real sturdy support from the very start. A flimsy trellis under the weight of a mature vine is a recipe for disappointment. Install it strong and secure, and it'll carry your vertical garden for years. Go vertical, and you've just doubled your usable growing space without adding a single square foot. Now let's talk about the power of choosing just one hero with number 2. Number 2 might be the single most counterintuitive trick on this whole list, because the instinct in a small yard is usually to do the opposite. Choose one strong focal point and resist the urge to scatter lots of smaller features around it. In a small space, clutter reads as chaos far more quickly than it does in a big yard, simply because there's less room to absorb it. If you try to fit in a specimen tree, a water feature, a sculpture, and 3 different types of seating all at once, a small yard will feel crowded, busy, and honestly, even smaller than it actually is, because the eye has nowhere restful to land. But choose just one beautiful, well-placed focal point, a single stunning specimen tree, one striking large container, one lovely piece of garden art, and suddenly the whole space feels calm, intentional, and, paradoxically, more spacious. This works because the eye and the brain read a clean, uncluttered space as larger than a busy one, even when the actual square footage is identical. Restraint in a small yard is your friend. For your design, pick the one thing you love most. A beautiful small ornamental tree, one gorgeous oversized container by the door, a single striking piece of art, and let everything else in the yard play a supporting role around it, rather than competing for attention. My tip, if you're struggling to choose, stand at the street and ask yourself where you want a visitor's eye to land first. Whatever that spot is, that's where your one focal point belongs. One hero, not 5 competing ones. That's the secret to a calm, spacious feeling small yard. Now let's talk about color and why less truly is more with number 3. Number 3 works hand in hand with our last point, and it's just as counterintuitive. Limit your color palette to just 2 or 3 colors, repeated throughout the yard. It's so tempting, especially in a small space, to want every inch to burst with variety, one of every color, crammed in to make the most of limited room. But here's what actually happens. A small bed exploding with 10 different colors reads as busy and chaotic chaotic spaces feel smaller and more cramped than they really are. A small bed with just 2 or 3 coordinated colors, repeated calmly throughout, reads as serene, intentional, and expansive, because the eye isn't working overtime trying to process a dozen competing hues in a tight area. This is actually a case where a small yard has an advantage over a big one. It's much easier and faster to keep a limited palette consistent when you're only working with a modest amount of space to begin with. For your design, choose a simple, pleasing combination, perhaps purples and whites with silver foliage or soft pinks and blues, and let that palette repeat through your containers, your beds, and even your front door color, so everything feels cohesively tied together rather than visually competing. My tip: white and silver foliage are wonderful peacemakers in a tight color scheme. They brighten a small space and calm down any colors that might otherwise clash, so don't be afraid to lean on them generously. A calm, coordinated palette makes a small yard feel serene and surprisingly generous. Now let's talk about choosing plants that are actually built for your scale, with number 4. Number 4 solves a problem so many small yard owners run into within just a year or two of planting. Choose dwarf and compact plant varieties bred specifically for smaller spaces. Here's the trap that catches so many people. You fall in love with a gorgeous shrub or tree at the nursery, plant it in your small front yard, and within a few years it's completely outgrown the space, crowding the walkway, pressing against the house, blocking the windows, requiring constant hard pruning just to keep it manageable. The plant isn't wrong. It's simply the wrong size for the space you gave it. The wonderful news is that for nearly every popular shrub, tree, and even some perennials, plant breeders have developed dwarf or compact varieties that offer all the same beauty, the same flowers, the same foliage, the same charm, in a fraction of the mature size. A dwarf Japanese maple, a compact boxwood, a miniature hydrangea, a patio-sized crepe myrtle. These give you the exact look you love, scaled appropriately for a small yard, without the years of fighting an oversized plant into submission. For your design, whenever you're drawn to a particular plant, actively look for the word dwarf, compact, or patio on the tag, and check the mature size carefully before you buy. That habit alone will save you years of frustration. My tip: dwarf varieties often cost a touch more than their full-size counterparts, but the time and effort you save on pruning, plus the years you avoid an outgrown, crowded-looking yard, make that small extra cost absolutely worth it. Right-sized plants keep a small yard looking proportional and polished for good. Now let's talk about the surprising power of a curve, with number 5. Number 5 is a classic designer's trick, and it's remarkably simple to put into practice. Lay out your path on a diagonal or a gentle curve, rather than a straight line. Here's the visual logic behind it. A straight path running directly from the sidewalk to your front door shows a visitor the entire length of your yard in a single glance. And once they can see it all at once, they also register instantly exactly how small it is. but a path that curves gently or runs on a diagonal across the space forces the eye to travel a longer visual route to get from one end to the other. That longer visual journey genuinely makes the space feel bigger because your brain measures distance partly by how much visual travel it takes to get somewhere, not just the straight line distance. There's also a lovely secondary benefit. A curved or diagonal path creates a small sense of discovery and anticipation, hiding just a little bit of the yard from the very first glance, which makes exploring it feel more interesting and generous than seeing everything laid bare all at once. For your design, even a gentle, subtle curve is enough. You don't need a dramatic winding path in a small space, just enough of an angle to break that direct, straight sight line from the street to the door. My tip: use the same garden hose trick we use for curved beds. Lay a hose down in the curve you're imagining, walk out to the street to check how it reads, and adjust until it feels natural and unforced before you commit to digging. A simple curve tricks the eye into perceiving far more space than actually exists. Now let's talk about what happens at the edges of your yard, with number 6. Number 6 deals with the very edges of your property, and it's a trick that's easy to overlook. Keep your boundaries, fences, walls, and hedges low or see-through rather than tall and solid. A tall, solid fence or a thick, opaque hedge might feel like it offers privacy, but in a small yard, it also does something else. It creates a hard visual stop, a wall that tells the eye the space ends exactly here, which makes the yard feel boxed in and confined. A low fence, an open picket style, or a see-through element like a simple metal railing does the opposite. It marks your property line without blocking the view beyond it, so your eye reads the space as continuing further than it technically does, blending your yard visually with whatever lies beyond, whether that's a street tree, a neighbor's garden, or open sky. This doesn't mean you have to sacrifice all sense of enclosure or privacy where you genuinely need it. It simply means choosing that boundary thoughtfully, rather than defaulting to the tallest, most solid option out of habit. For your design, consider a low picket fence, an open rail fence, or a hedge kept trimmed to waist height rather than towering overhead, especially along the front boundary facing the street, where an open, welcoming feel matters most. My tip: if you do need more privacy in a particular spot, say along one side facing a close neighbor, you can still keep the street-facing boundary open and low and reserve a taller, more solid screen only for that one specific area that truly needs it. Low, open boundaries let your small yard visually borrow the space beyond it, and that idea leads perfectly into our next trick, number 7. Number 7 is a technique that professional landscape designers have a lovely name for: borrowed scenery. Deliberately framing your small yard so it visually incorporates whatever beautiful view exists just beyond your property line. Here's the idea. Look beyond your actual boundary. Is there a lovely street tree, a neighbor's flowering shrub, a distant hillside, or even just an attractive patch of open sky? Rather than blocking that view or ignoring it, a clever small yard design deliberately frames it, so it becomes a visual extension of your own garden. Even though you don't own or maintain a single inch of it, your eye simply doesn't distinguish between your property and the pretty tree next door. If it's visible and it's lovely, it reads as part of your view, and your effective sense of space grows accordingly, at absolutely no cost to you. This works especially well combined with our low boundary idea from a moment ago. A low fence or open hedge lets that borrowed scenery actually be seen, rather than walled off entirely. For your design, position your key sightlines, from your front window, your entry, or a spot along your path, to deliberately capture whatever beautiful, borrowed view exists nearby, and avoid placing tall obstructions right in that critical line of sight. My tip: walk your property and actually look for these borrowed views on purpose. Stand at your front door, your window, different spots along a path, and notice what's visible beyond your fence line. You might be surprised how much lovely, extra scenery you already have access to, completely free, just waiting to be framed properly. Your neighbor's beautiful tree can become part of your view. Borrowed scenery costs nothing and adds real depth. Now let's talk about the biggest space hog in most small yards, with number 8. Number 8 tackles what is often, quite honestly, the single biggest waste of space in a small front yard: shrink your lawn or remove it altogether. A patch of plain grass sitting there doing very little visually often takes up a disproportionate amount of a small yard's precious square footage, space that could instead be filled with layered, colorful, textured planting that actually earns its keep. And here's the perceptual trick. A lawn is visually flat and empty, which our eye tends to read as wasted or unused space, while a well-planted bed, even a small one, reads as rich, intentional, and full. Converting even a modest strip of lawn into planting can make the whole yard feel more abundant and complete, not less. This doesn't necessarily mean removing every blade of grass if you love having some. It simply means being honest about whether that lawn is truly earning its space or whether it's just there out of habit, taking up room that colorful, layered planting would use far more beautifully. For your design, consider replacing all or part of a small lawn with a mixed planting bed, a ground cover, or even an attractive gravel or paved seating area. Anything that puts that square footage to more active, visually rich use. My tip: if you're not ready to remove the lawn entirely, start by shrinking it and giving those reclaimed edges to deeper, layered planting beds. Even a modest expansion of your beds at the lawn's expense makes a real, visible difference. Every square foot in a small yard should be earning its keep, and a plain lawn rarely does. Now let's talk about a simple material trick that ties everything together, with number 9. Number 9 is a simple, practical trick that has an outsized effect on how put together and spacious a small yard feels. Stick to one consistent hardscape material throughout, rather than mixing several. Picture a small yard with a brick path, a gravel seating area, a concrete step, and a wooden edging, all competing for attention in different textures and colors. Even if each individual element is attractive on its own, that patchwork of materials reads as busy and disjointed, and it visually chops a small space into even smaller feeling fragments. Now picture that same yard with just one material, say a single type of natural stone, used consistently for the path, the edging, and the small seating area. The eye reads it as one continuous, flowing space rather than several disconnected little zones, and that continuity makes the whole yard feel larger and more cohesive. This is one of the easiest, cheapest tricks on this entire list because it doesn't require adding anything new. It simply means being disciplined about the materials you already choose. For your design, pick one primary hardscape material, a particular stone, brick, or gravel, and use it consistently for your path, any edging, and any small hardscape features, rather than introducing a new material for each individual element. My tip: if you already have a patchwork of materials from years of piecemeal additions, you don't necessarily need to rip everything out at once. Prioritize unifying the most visible, most used areas first, like the main path from the street to the door, for the biggest visual impact with the least effort. One consistent material makes a small space read as one flowing whole, rather than scattered fragments. Now, for our 10th and final idea, one most people never think to try. Here it is. And here it is. Number 10, the trick I promised you, the one that transforms how your small yard feels the moment the sun goes down. Add thoughtful outdoor lighting. Here's something most people never consider. For roughly half of every day, your front yard exists in the dark, and if it simply disappears into blackness the moment the sun sets, you're not just losing beauty, you're also losing any sense of depth or dimension at night, because a dark yard reads as nothing more than a flat, featureless void, however carefully you designed it for daytime. But add even a few well-placed lights, a soft glow along the path, a gentle uplight on your one focal specimen from earlier, a warm light by the door, and something wonderful happens. Those points of light create depth, layers, and a sense of a space that continues on into the shadows beyond them, rather than simply stopping at a dark wall. In fact, thoughtful lighting can make a small yard feel larger at night than it even does during the day, because darkness naturally obscures the actual boundaries, while your lights suggest a space that extends further than what's fully illuminated. The eye fills in the rest with imagination, and imagination is rarely small. For your design, start simply with solar path lights guiding the way to your door. Add a single uplight on that one focal point we talked about earlier, and keep the light warm and soft rather than harsh and bright. You're creating gentle pools of glow and inviting shadow, not floodlighting the whole space. My tip: resist the urge to light every single corner evenly. A few thoughtfully placed lights with real shadow in between them actually create more depth and mystery, and therefore more perceived space, than lighting everything uniformly bright. A small yard that glows beautifully after dark feels larger, richer, and more magical than one that simply vanishes at sunset. Now let's bring it all together. And there you have it, 10 ideas that make a small front yard feel dramatically larger, more open, and more generous than its actual square footage, from going vertical and choosing one strong focal point, all the way to that final trick of thoughtful evening lighting. And I hope, more than anything, that you're leaving this video with a completely different feeling about your small space, not as a limitation to apologize for, but as an opportunity to design something genuinely wonderful. Remember, you don't need to tackle all 10 at once. Pick just one or two that spoke to you most. Maybe it's finally training a vine up that bare wall, or simplifying your color palette down to just 2 or 3 shades. And you'll already feel your yard opening up. So tell me down in the comments, how big is your actual front yard, like I asked you at the very start? And which of these 10 ideas are you most excited to try? Share it with your growing zone, and let's make your small space feel absolutely enormous together. And do go say a warm hello to a fellow small space gardener down there in the comments. Some of my very favorite gardens in this whole community are the tiniest ones, transformed with real thought and care. I've got more wonderful ideas coming your way soon, so make sure you're subscribed with that bell turned on so you never miss a video. Until next time, this is Eleanor. Keep your hands in the soil and your heart in the garden. Take care now. Bye-bye.